A very good day. Today we are going to discuss about effects of autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is divided into two parts: parasympathetic nervous system and sympathetic nervous system. The nerve supply of parasympathetic nervous system is cervicosacral, whereas the nerve involved for sympathetic system is thoracolumbar. Now let's discuss the important differences between parasympathetic and sympathetic effects on the body. So first organ which I am going to discuss is the eye. Now parasympathetic system will cause constriction of pupil. The process is called as meiosis. The meiosis actually takes place because of the receptor, that is M3 receptor, which is when activated, it causes contraction of the constrictor pupillae. And this contraction of the constrictor pupillae will lead to meiosis or constriction of pupil. Now, another receptor where it's involved is M3, which is located in ciliary body, and it causes contraction of the ciliary body. Now, contraction of the ciliary body with constriction of pupil and along with convergence of the eyeballs is what we call it as accommodation reflex. And whenever pupil constricts in response to the light is called as light reflex. Now let's see the effect of sympathetic system on the eye. Now sympathetic system activation is through alpha 1 receptors, and whenever alpha 1 receptors are activated, it contracts radial pupillae. The contraction of radial pupillae leads to dilatation of the pupil called as mydriasis. Now, another receptor where sympathetic plays its role is beta 1 receptors, which are present on the ciliary body, and the importance of this receptor is secretion of aqueous humor. Okay, now let's move on to the medulla. The effect of sympathetic system on the medulla is mainly to modulate the sympathetic outflow. Now in the sympathetic system, the role is mainly mediated via alpha 2 receptors. These alpha 2 receptors are basically present presynaptically, and they cause decreased sympathetic outflow from the medulla, which finally leads to reduction in the blood pressure. Now let's see the effects of parasympathetic system on the salivary glands and various GI glands. Now all the GI and salivary glands, including lacrymal glands, have M3 receptors. And whenever M3 receptors are stimulated, they cause increased secretions. For example, increased salivary secretions, increased lacrimal secretions, increased sweat glands, and not only that, it also increases or stimulates acid secretion. Now on the other side, the sympathetic system, the salivary glands and the lacrimal glands, you see decreased salivary secretion. And not only that, it causes salivary secretion to be thick. And this action is mediated mainly by the beta receptors. The effect of parasympathetic system on the bronchial smooth muscles is mainly mediated by M3 receptors, and this will cause constriction of bronchi smooth muscle. Whereas effect of sympathetic system on the bronchial smooth muscles is mainly mediated by beta 2 receptors, and this beta 2 receptors activation will cause bronchodilation. Now another effect of beta 2 receptor which is seen on the mast cell. So whenever the beta 2 receptor is stimulated, it will stabilize the mast cell, which in turn will inhibit the release of histamine. Now let's discuss the effects of autonomic nervous system on the heart. In the heart, parasympathetic nervous system is mainly innervated by M2 receptors, which is supplied by the vagus nerve. And herein, the parasympathetic nervous system causes decrease in the heart rate, and the effect is mainly mediated by the vagus nerve. Whereas sympathetic system, the effect on the heart is mainly mediated by beta 1 receptors. Now there are three effects which is worth noted for the beta 1 receptor is increased force of contraction, called as inotropic effects, increased conduction, called as dromotropic effects, increased heart rate, called as chronotropic effects. Now, apart from the heart, the effect on blood vessels is mainly mediated by alpha 1 and alpha 2 receptors. Now, the alpha 1 receptors mainly causes constriction of the blood vessels, whereas alpha 2 can cause constriction of the small blood vessels. Whereas the beta 2 receptors on the other side has exactly opposite effect of alpha 1, that is, it causes relaxation of the blood vessels. Now, other miscellaneous effects you see in the series is alpha 2 effect, where it will stimulate platelet aggregation, and whereas alpha 1 effect, which will cause contraction of erector pili muscle, and that's what we call as goosebumps. In stomach and GI tract, parasympathetic system mediates its effect mainly by M3 receptors. M3 receptors mainly causes stimulation of acid secretion, and also it will stimulate GI motility. And again, the effect is mainly mediated by the vagus nerve. And there are other effects which is again mediated by M3 receptor, is increase in the insulin and glucagon secretion from pancreas. On the other side, parasympathetic system will cause relaxation of the GI, or it inhibits the GI motility, and that effect is mediated through beta 2 receptors. Whereas alpha 2 receptor has a different role. We call it as heterotropic receptors, where alpha 2, which is a branch which is of sympathetic system, ends on cholinergic system, that is, it inhibits the acetylcholine release, thereby again relaxing the GI tract. And it is also known to decrease insulin and increase glucagon secretion from the pancreas. As for the gallbladder is concerned, gallbladder mainly has M3 receptors. So whenever M3 receptors are stimulated, it causes contraction of the gallbladder. Whereas sympathetic system has main effect or major effect on the liver, where it causes glycogenolysis, gluconeogenesis, and increases the output of glucose. So the net effect, what you will see, is increase in the blood sugar, and these effects are mediated by beta 2 receptors. And whereas beta 3 receptor is only involved with lipolysis. The effect of parasympathetic system on the urinary bladder is mainly mediated by M3 receptors. Now, M3 receptors is present in the detrusor muscle of the urinary bladder and as well as bladder sphincter. Now, the effect is interesting here. It causes contraction of the detrusor muscle and it relaxes the bladder sphincter, which in turn will cause voiding of the urine. Whereas parasympathetic system has exactly opposite effect, but the effect is mainly mediated by two receptors. One is beta 2 receptors, which are present on the detrusor muscle, which causes relaxation of the detrusor muscle, and alpha 1 receptors, which is present in the sphincter, will cause contraction of the sphincter. So the overall effect of sympathetic system is exactly opposite to parasympathetic system, that it causes retention of the urine. And there's another very important effect of sympathetic system is on the kidney. Now, interestingly, in kidney, which mainly has beta 1 receptors, so whenever these beta 1 receptors are stimulated, it will cause release of renin from the juxtaglomerular cells. And this renin will in turn cause or formation of angiotensin. And then this angiotensin will in turn increase blood pressure and also cause aldosterone release from the medulla. And not only that, even it also helps for release of epinephrine from adrenal medulla. Effect of autonomic nervous system on the anal canal is similar to the effect on the urinary bladder. Here, parasympathetic system again have M3 receptors, that is in the anal wall as well as in the sphincter. So any stimulation of M3 receptors in this area will cause contraction of the anal wall and at the same time it relaxes the anal sphincter, which will lead to the process of defecation, whereas sympathetic system has exactly opposite effect, and effects are mediated via two different receptors. One is beta 2 receptors, which causes relaxation of the anal wall, whereas alpha 1 receptors will cause contraction of the anal sphincter, where it will retain the stools. Now let's go to the final area, that is reproductive system. In reproductive system, the effect on the genitals is mainly mediated by M3 receptors, which causes penile erection. And whereas the effect on the uterus is mainly mediated by sympathetic system, again the effect is mediated by two different receptors. One is alpha 1, which contracts non-pregnant uterus, whereas beta 2, which relaxes the pregnant uterus. So this finishes basics of autonomic nervous system. In my next subsequent videos, we'll discuss the effects of drugs in parasympathetic systems and as well as in sympathetic systems. Please keep on listening to me in the later videos, and thank you for your support. This is Dr. Ravinder Singh Rajput, your tutor for pharmacology. Goodbye.